You don't like the fact that they're white, and that's why they're coming.
Do you think Afrikaner farmers are the most persecuted group in the world?
I think those 49 people that came certainly felt they were persecuted.
Do you think they're more persecuted than Uyghurs or Rohingyas, or more persecuted than political dissidents in Cuba or Venezuela or Nicaragua, or more persecuted than those who would be threatened should they be returned to Afghanistan by violence by the Taliban?
Well, the problem we face there is the volume problem, okay? If you look at all the persecuted people of the world, it's millions of people. They can't all come here.
Would you agree with me, Mr. Secretary, that if we're interpreting the statutory phrase, a well-justified fear of persecution, we should try to do that in an even-handed way?
I think we should try to do that in the interest of the national security of the United States.
So okay, I agree with you too. We should. Should we try to do it in an even-handed way? So for example, should we say, if you're persecuted on the grounds of your religion, we'll let you in if you're a Christian, but not if you're a Muslim?
I think that the United States has a right to allow into this country and prioritize allowance of who they want to allow to come in.
But I'm going to ask you, what?
Yeah.
So a well-justified fear of persecution?
Yeah, they thought that their farms were being burned down and they would be killed. I think that's a pretty good justification for wanting to come. They're afraid for their lives.
And should it be applied in an even-handed way? That's an easy.
No, our foreign policy doesn't require even-handedness. It requires prioritizing the interests of the United States.
The phrase says you are entitled to entrance as a refugee if you demonstrate a well-justified fear of persecution.
No, you're not entitled.
So
you're
can
allowed.
You have a different standard based upon the color of somebody's skin? Would that be acceptable?
Well, I'm not the one arguing that. Apparently you are.
To the 50 Afrikaners who fled to the US, calling themselves refugees, you are not refugees. You are just a case study of white flight dressed up as martyrdom. You're not escaping violence. You're escaping equality. South Africa didn't chase you away. You ran. Yes, South Africa is one of the most violent countries in the world. Yes, brutality exists. But let's be honest, violence affects all communities, not just white farmers. Black, colored, Indian, and yes, white people are all targets of a national crime crisis. What we have is a breakdown in safety, not a white genocide. This is not ethnic cleansing, it's criminal collapse, and running to the US won't fix it. You are part of a 7% minority, but somehow still manages to control over 70% of the wealth. That is not persecution, that's privilege on a guilt trip. And let's be real, if we tried to relocate just half of the Afrikaans population, it would take decades, billions in logistics, and you'd still end up culturally homeless in a country that don't want your apartheid baggage. You're not brave, you're not victims. You're scared of a world where you don't get to be in charge, and that makes the rest of the Afrikaans community cringe, because you make us look weak. South Africa is broken, and it's our problem to solve. So if you don't have the spine to do so,
y'all may not believe this, but being born and raised Alabama, I have never once ever looked somebody in the eye and told them to come back where they came from. I ain't never said no, speak no English, nothing like that. In the next few months, if you see a video coming out of me screaming something like that or even more ignorant, just know I'm saying it 6 inches away from a white South Africaner's face. Because apparently they're coming to Alabama. I ain't never said nothing like go back to Africa. When I tell you I'm gonna put my whole body into it, I mean, I'm gonna get that like deep chest voice. Just go back to where you came from. Anyway, yeah.
When the United States announced it would consider granting refugee status to white South African farmers, many people were shocked, but not for reasons you might think. This isn't just about immigration, it goes deeper, touching the painful nerve of racial history, privilege, and global inequality. How does a group of white landowners, many of whom have historically benefited from systems of racial segregation, suddenly become refugees in the eyes of the West? And why is their suffering highlighted, while the pain of millions from war-torn, impoverished, and politically oppressed nations is often sidelined? We are diving into the uncomfortable conversation that many shy away from. Who gets prioritized when it comes to immigration and why? Why is that people fleeing persecution in countries like Sudan, Syria, or Haiti often face suspicion, yet white South African farmers are seen as ideal refugees? First, let's address the claim that these farmers are being persecuted. Supporters of their resettlement argue that land reforms in South Africa, where land expropriation without compensation has been proposed, make them targets. Some even describe it as ethnic cleansing of white farmers, but that term carries weight and using it demands a closer look. Yes, there have been crimes committed on farms. But data from South Africa's own crime statistics show that these acts of violence affect all races, and white farmers are not disproportionately targeted. In fact, the narrative of white victimhood often overshadows the broader socio-economic challenges that millions of Black South Africans still face, challenges inherited from centuries of colonialism and apartheid. So when America offers refugee to this specific group, it raises eyebrows. Is this about humanitarianism, or does it reflect something deeper, a desire to preserve a certain racial or cultural image of who is worthy of saving? Let's be honest. When brown or Black people seek refuge, the conversation is often about security risks, integration challenges, or economic burden. But when white people arrive, especially those who speak English and own land, it becomes narrative of opportunity and cultural alignment.
Guys, I found one of the 49 Afrikaners in the US, and the story is good. So I see this video, and it's by this woman who says she was on TikTok a couple of days ago when she comes across this video of the 49 Afrikaners arriving in the US. She is stunned to learn that one of the so-called refugees is none other than her stepfather. She's shocked because she's like, what do you mean you're a refugee? You just kicked me out of your house and you're not even Afrikaans. So the stepfather makes a response video in which he says apparently he was married to her mother for quite some time, but he paints his stepdaughter or former stepdaughter as a wayward child who squandered every opportunity he had given her. And he suggests he had it pretty good here because he says or suggests that he ran a business in Cape Town, or was at least her employer, because he says she worked for him in Cape Town, but he had to fire her because she committed fraud or something to that effect. And he says he is Afrikaans. His family just didn't speak Afrikaans. They spoke English, but he is Afrikaans. And he has something to say to all of you criticizing this refugee program. He says he is a refugee because he's a farmer, or he's got farming experience in agriculture, and he was the victim of a savage attack on a farm. He was attacked 15 times with a knife. And I guess that's something that only happens to white farmers. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, he says he's a refugee, and yeah, that's the story. Goodness.
Accepting these South African farmers is exactly what our country was founded on: giving white landowners special treatment. We're not just accepting a few white African refugees, we're creating new refugees all over the world. It's easier for white people to assimilate to American culture because they look like me. That's why it's so hard for me to get along with my children. My kids make up 3/5 of my family, and unfortunately, they're only going to count as 3/5 of a person soon. These immigrants will assimilate. I mean, they believe in conspiracy theories, they're running away from their problems, and they're trying to pretend that segregation in their country wasn't that bad. They're going to fit right in. If your country voted to take away your private property, please come to America, where we will never do that, because you probably will not be able to afford owning private property. They're running away because the Great Replacement is not a conspiracy theory. You know who'd make a great replacement for me is anyone. And we need more white people because our next civil war is going to be interracial. It's going to pit brother against brother and sister against sister. And from what I can tell, based on the videos I've watched on the internet, brothers and sisters are already getting pretty rowdy.
Moreover, some critics say these immigrants carry with them ideologies that align with certain conspiracy theories like Great Replacement, and some have downplayed South Africa's past of racial segregation, pretending apartheid wasn't as brutal as history proves it was. This ideological comfort sadly makes it easier for them to blend into far-right narratives within the United States. We need to confront the fact that America's immigration choices often reflect its historical biases, privileging whiteness, land ownership, and cultural similarities over universal human suffering. Now, let's talk about why all this matters beyond just South Africa's farmers. Because when we prioritize some refugees over others, based not on the urgency of their suffering, but on race, wealth, or ideology, we set a dangerous precedent. We send a message about whose pain is palatable and whose is not. And we reinforce global hierarchies where whiteness continues to open doors that remain shut for others. Let's remember, America has historically welcomed immigrants who look like the dominant group. The Homestead Act of 1862 gave free land to settlers, almost all of them white. Today, those patterns are echoing again when white South Africa farmers are told, "You are welcome here," while Haitian asylum seekers are turned away at the border. The message is crystal clear. And then there's the issue of assimilation. Some say it's easier for white people to assimilate because they look like us. But think about that statement. What are we really saying? That shared skin color makes someone more American? That's not just dangerous, it's false. Because assimilation is about values, not looks. Plenty of non-white immigrants come to America and embrace culture, contribute to the economy, and become proud citizens. But when we judge someone's potential to fit in based on skin color, we are not assessing their humanity, we are defending a hierarchy. And let's not ignore the economic irony. Some white South Africans say they are escaping land seizure to protect their wealth and future, but then they arrive in America where wealth inequality is at a record high. Housing is unaffordable and land ownership is a luxury, not a right. So what are they really running from? And what are they expecting to find? In the bigger picture, we must ask, is America being used as a political haven to protect the idea of white landowners as a symbol of civilization, stability, and heritage? And if so, what does that say about our collective consciousness? This story is about more than South Africa. It's about who we are, what we value, and how we decide who gets saved. If we truly believe in human rights and equal treatment, then we must apply the refugee standards fairly, no matter the color of someone's skin, their economic background, or their cultural familiarity. Anything less is a betrayal of the values we claim to hold. So the next time someone talks about persecuted white farmers, ask questions, look deeper, challenge the narrative. Because real justice isn't about who looks like us, it's about who needs us. Well, drop a comment, let me know what your thoughts are about this, and also remember to subscribe, like, and share as well. And until next time, bye bye.